Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden and this is my follow-up to Thanos vs. Hulk. So after the release of Infinity War, we noticed that there's been quite a lot of interest in this old video I did on the story Thanos vs. Hulk. I thought that was interesting, and because it's been so long since I've talked about this story, I put it up as one of the potential ideas for something I could talk about on our Patreon polls that we do every week. It ended up winning, so here we are with my little follow-up to look back on Thanos vs. Hulk and see if we can determine what's wrong. Looking back on my old video, it's kind of amusing because it's so old, there's a lot of tech and various techniques in terms of editing style that I haven't fully developed yet. It was a nice little trip down memory lane, as it were. But, by and large, my commentary in that video is more or less correct. It was a lackluster comic that really didn't live up to its name, but even if it was called something else, it would have been disappointing. This is a story by, and largely drawn by, Jim Starlin, the creator of Thanos and a bunch of other interesting cosmic characters and ideas that have defined Marvel for the better part of a few decades. Yet Thanos vs. Hulk sucked, and in a rather profound way. Not only did the Hulk and Thanos barely fight at all, they literally fight more in Infinity War than they do in this, and that's just at the beginning of that movie. But the plot itself is this weird meandering story involving the Negative Zone and Annihilus that just doesn't add anything to the greater narrative of Marvel or even just provide something satisfying on its own. Something went terribly wrong with Thanos vs. Hulk, and it's become clear since the time that I created that first video what exactly went down. I do actually have some answers going into here, and some ground to cover that I think is relevant that I didn't know about when I made the first Thanos vs. Hulk video. So what happened? Well, basically Marvel Comics, the company, happened. Jim Starlin's a very creative dude who's a talented man, and it's even apparent in Thanos vs. Hulk. Whatever you might say about the actual story itself, which definitely is lacking, it looks gorgeous. It has its own unique kind of visuals to it. The Negative Zone looks super interesting, and every panel is drawn with a lot of detail and depth, and the coloring to it gives it a very unique look and sense that I don't really have much to compare it to in other comics out there. It hits its own unique look that is very strong for a miniseries to do, and that adds something to the overall experience of reading this comic. But like I said, the story sucks, and it's horribly mistitled. That part's not Jim Starlin's fault whatsoever. Marvel basically made him rename it because this is basically a lead-in story for another Infinity comic Jim Starlin did sometime later. So that's on Marvel, but so is, in my opinion, the lackluster quality of this story. Since I made that video and since Thanos vs. Hulk, Jim Starlin has left Marvel, and he hasn't had the best things to say about the company as a whole. For one thing, he revealed even though he's the guy who created Thanos, he's actually made more money from KG Beast and Batman vs. Superman than the entire collective of the MCU films. Now, he said that before Infinity War came out, so hopefully that's changed. And he has said in the past Marvel Studios, the company that makes all the MCU films, has been very good to him and treated him with a great deal of respect. It's Marvel Comics, the company that publishes all their comics and has a lot to do with the general merchandising of their stuff outside of the MCU films, that really has treated him horribly. And part of the reason that he left the company is that Tom Brewitt basically stole one of his ideas. It seems very apparent that Jim Starlin was working on a comic involving Thanos and the Infinity Gems of some form or another, and that Mark Waid is apparently working on a very similar story that Marvel came out with after Starlin had pitched them his original idea. Now, we don't live within this company and we don't know what exactly is true, but it's not exactly out of character for Brewitt or Marvel Comics in general to pull crazy crap like this. And Jim Starlin is not the first person to leave or have been burnt out by Marvel Comics as a result of their meandering nonsense that leads to horrible situations like this, and creators not being paid the way they should be paid, and all the other nonsense that has led to Starlin leaving the comics and a general deterioration in the quality of his work. There might be other things going on here, but I really suspect Marvel Comics is the reason that this happened, and a strong example of their management just doing a jaw-droppingly bad job at retaining legendary figures like Jim Starlin on their payroll. Thanos vs. Hulk is kind of the byproduct of that behavior more than anything else. At least that's how I've come to see it. So that's all I really wanted to share. I felt it was relevant to bring this up. I've talked about this whole thing in other videos before, but I feel like people might not have seen that, considering they're in random top 10s and that sort of thing. And I wanted to make a separate video getting into the why of it for those who have watched the Thanos vs. Hulk video and are wondering how it came to be that this legendary creator made such a lackluster story. It's super disappointing, and it also means that if Marvel wants to come out with a cool Thanos vs. Hulk story, maybe following up on some of this awesome stuff that we saw in Infinity War, they can't, or at least they have to reconcile with the fact that they already made a title coming out with it. It doesn't necessarily reflect their current behavior or their attitude with every creator, but it is disappointing. It should be noted, however, that other creators have come back to Marvel, other creators have had a much better experience with the company. It's not all universal and it's not all like this. It's just an interesting example of one relationship with the creator gone particularly bad, and it's a particularly jarring one considering how big of a name this is. Like, do you know how much Marvel owes to Jim Starlin at this point? The creator of Thanos? Thanos? We all saw Infinity War, right? We all understand how significant that is now. Marvel has a lot to answer to in this regard, and I don't think they ever fully will reconcile with this stuff, but it's definitely something they need to improve on going forward. They desperately need to treat their creative staff better. It's not the first time we've come across this issue, and it won't be the last, and it's definitely not the only creator who's been screwed over by Marvel simply not caring about their own talent. And that's shameful. The MCU and that whole company doesn't do this anymore. And there's good reason for it. And there's a good reason why a lot of the actors stick around with these movies a lot longer than the average film franchise. And they're committed to it. Because they like working for it. You don't appear in 8 or 9 MCU films unless you enjoy what you're doing. And that's what's going on here. So Marvel has a lot to learn in this regard. And this doesn't apply to DC. Like I said, Jim Starlin's had nothing but good things to say about DC, and they treat their creators at least comparatively well. Not every writer and artist experience at DC has been perfect, and Warner Brothers has done questionable things here and there, but I have never heard of them screwing over someone as prolific as Jim Starlin. So yeah, that's something. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section below and what you think of Thanos vs. Hulk and what happened. I'm curious what everyone's thoughts are on the matter, and thanks for watching. We have a lot of great content planned going forward, so be sure to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.